Actor and director Robin Herford was one of the original members of the Alan Ayckbourn Theatre Company at the Stephen Joseph Theatre in and around in Scarborough. In this episode, he talks about working with the world famous playwright and what it was like to create those original plays.
So you went to Bristol and you were obviously then just thinking about being an actor, or in the deep recesses of your mind were you thinking, actually, I'd quite like to direct right from the start?
No, I think I directed a little bit at university, but I'd acted much more. I'd done 17 productions while I was at St Andrews. I didn't do much philosophy, but I did an awful lot of acting, and I directed a couple of things, but I didn't know what I was doing really. So you know, acting, I sort of thought I roughly knew what I was doing, but it was when I went to Scarborough that Alan always encourages people to do more than one thing. He always believes you've got a second string to your bow, and I mean, he started as an actor.
Oh, wonderful for you! What a great opportunity!
Yes, and then he became a director, and then he became a writer. And he's kept up the directing, writing, obviously, you know, up till now he's still doing that. He encouraged a lot of us there. There was Chris Godwin, there was Alison Skilbeck, Stephen Lowe, Stephen Malatrat, who wrote the adaptation of The Woman in Black. He was an actor there. We were all in the acting company, and you know, some of us were encouraged to do other things as well. And I had said in my first interview to Alan, I would quite, you know, I think I might quite like to direct sometime, but, you know, somewhere in the future. Anyway, he pushed me. And after 18 months as an actor there, I was having a ball, but I was 250 miles away from London. And typical actor's paranoia, you think everyone who ever knew my name would have forgotten it by now. So I went to him and I said, Alan, please don't think I'm not enjoying myself, but I really need to get back down to London. And he said, at your first interview, you said you'd quite like to direct. If I offered you a production, would you stay for the next season? And I could feel my hand being pushed up the back of my back, but I thought, yeah, that sounds pretty good. so he said, you can choose what you want to do. You can cast it yourself from within the company. So I did a Joe Orton play, A Ruffian on the Stair. And as a result of that, he said, why don't you become my associate director? Oh. And you can still act, because I know you still want to act, but Alan, will direct 60% of the shows, and you, Robin, will do 40% of them. We'll commission the new plays together, we'll interview at the new company together, we'll choose the actors, you'll find out how a company works, and all this for £79 a week. But I mean, my goodness,
things haven't changed really, have they?
No, they haven't.
let's just go back to 1976, which is when you went to that theatre. Was the Stephen Joseph Theatre already up and running and doing well? Because didn't he start in a library or something in Scarborough?
It was when I went up in April '76. We were to rehearse the last summer season that was ever going to happen at the Library Theatre, which was literally, it was just an upper room in the public library, and it was divided. We had the hire of two rooms. One of them was the auditorium, and the other was subdivided by screens for boys' dressing room, girls' dressing room, stage management, publicity, marketing. You know, it was just ridiculous, and the whole building was served by one cold tap. So, so you had
those
to
were
go
the days.
I know. I thought, I've come to work for a multi-millionaire playwright on £45 a week, and there's one cold tap to put your makeup on and off with. There was a loo call just after the last audience member had been admitted, so you could dash across the public entrance to use the library loos and come back before the show started. I mean, it was extraordinary. But the work that was being done there was just fantastic. And of course, Alan's latest play, which then was just between ourselves, was running in repertoire. So there were 4 plays, and we played them for a week each. So you play Thursday to Wednesday, and then Wednesday night they'd take down the old set, put up the new one, and then you'd go in and do it another play on the Wednesday, on the Thursday night. Through the whole thing was based around the summer season. You see, so if a tripper comes to Scarborough for a week, he can see 2 different plays. If he comes for a fortnight, he can see 3 different plays. Actually,
Tremendous.
He comes for 3 weeks, but for 3 weeks he can see 4. But and it made perfect sense, really. It was hard.
When you first went to Alan Ayckbourn, did you have to do a formal audition? Did you read something?
Oh yes, I feel a bit embarrassed about this, Mark, because I gate crashed the audition in a way. What happened was that Leslie, my wife, and I were both out of work. We just finished at the Nottingham Playhouse, and we were writing letters. Every morning, she'd go into the kitchen, I'd go into the dining room. We'd write our letters to every theatre. Didn't have an agent. A lot of people didn't in those days. I didn't have an agent for 14 years. But I wrote to people, and at lunchtime we'd meet, and I'd say, right, who have you written to? And she said, I've written so. Oh, and Scarborough. I said, what's at Scarborough? She said, well, Alan Ayckbourn's at Scarborough. I said, oh, right, yeah. Oh, well, yeah. And about 3 or 4 days later, I got round to writing to him. A week goes by, she gets an audition for Alan. And I think, oh, I wonder whether I will, and I don't. And I think, oh, that's a pity. Anyway, she had this audition coming up in London. We were living in Derby at the time because it was the middle of the country. We just got married with no money. And so we were living in Derby, and we were due to go down. She was due to go down for this audition. 3 days before the audition, she developed an abscess on her tooth, and her face swelled, so she looked like a sort of left-handed hamster. So that one side of her face completely couldn't say anything. And so I said, well, I'll phone Scarborough and say you can't come. So I phoned, and I think I must have spoken to Heather, who's now Lady Ayckbourn, Alan's partner. And I said, I'm really sorry. I'm phoning on behalf of Leslie Mead, who unfortunately is unable to come to the audition because she's got an abscess. I don't know whether it's possible to reschedule it for a little later, but she can't speak at the moment. But I could come. And Heather, being so polite, said, "Oh, well, yes, well, yes, well, you come instead then." So I went instead, and I had a quarter of an hour.
Amazing.
I know, it's good, isn't it? I had a quarter of an hour interview in the tiny spotlight office, not the grand spotlight offices as they are now, but a tiny little room on Cranbourne Street, with Alan, the man himself, and Bob Eaton, his associate director. And in those days, you took 2 pieces. You took a Shakespeare and a modern, or a classical. And I took as my modern piece something, an American piece. And it just so happened that Alan was looking for an American to play an American GI in the first season. And so I waited and waited, and then I got a call, could you come back for a longer audition in his house in Keats Grove in Hampstead? And I showed up one afternoon and we chatted. And he was very nervous in those days and very shy. He's slightly less shy now, but he was quite nervous, and he was chain smoking Benson and Hedges, and I'd just given up. I'd given up as an economy measure, but I left Nottingham Playhouse having no work. so, so, and he was chain smoking, and he talked pretty solidly for about an hour. And I thought, God, I'm making no impression at all. He's telling me all about Scarborough and all about Stephen Joseph and about the plays, and it was fascinating. But I thought, I'm making no impression at all. So I then started, and I talked for about an hour, and in the midst of which, Alan had a transatlantic call from New York. He said, I'm terribly sorry, I'm going to have to take this. Heather had just popped out to the shops or something. And so he took this phone call, and he had his cup of black coffee on the arm of his chair. And he was doing this chat, and I was pretending not to be there. And he shifted a bit and knocked his cup of coffee off the chair onto the middle of this beautiful shag. It was a sort of a sheepskin rug, white, and there was this. The content. I thought, right, this is where I show my mettle, and I leapt up, and I was sort of going, I'll go and sort it, and so I went. Found my way to the kitchen, and I found my way to the sink, and I found the J cloths, and I got a cloth and a bowl of water, and I brought it back, and I started to mop this thing, and it just made it worse. It was dreadful. It just seemed to spread. There was this sort of murky brown mark in the middle of the rug. Anyway, that was. And then he got off the phone and said, well, don't worry about the rug. I never liked it anyway, So he then talked. We'd both run out of things to say by that time. But he was too shy to sort of bring it to a close. And in the end, I invented a train to get. I said, I'm sorry, I've got to get the train back to Derby. I thought, I've blown that. That's no good. First the coffee, and then, But about a week later, I got a phone call saying, come and join us on a 5-month contract, just today's cast. And
oh, fantastic.
Oh, it was fantastic. And so
I think it sounds to me like he was talking and he was nervous and the coffee went everywhere, but also he is a genius. He's a very bright guy, and he was probably really getting to know you, thinking, is this a guy I want on board? He was being very canny there, I think.
Yeah, I think, my directing style is directly taken from his, which is basically, do you like actors? Is a question I often say to young directors. And they say, well, what's that got to do with it? I said, it's terribly important. Because if you don't like actors and enjoy being with actors, and the sort of spark, the sparkiness that comes off actors and the imaginative leaps that they make, if you don't enjoy that process, don't do it. If you think they're your puppets, forget it, because that's hopeless. Why keep a dog and bark yourself? You've got this talent ahead of you. And since becoming a director, and I now direct far more than I act, and I have such respect for actors because they do the really difficult, dangerous thing. They go over the top when the whistle goes. Someone says you're on. And you have to do it, whether you're feeling terrible, whether you're feeling nervous, whatever you're doing, you have to do. And so I think that being in auditions with Alan was quite fun, because we both have our lists, and Alan had little marks that he'd write in on the top of the thing, P for possible. VP for very possible, VinXP for very inexperienced but possible, NR for not really, and NIMS for not in a month of Sundays. So it was quite it was a real education. Spending days with him.
I auditioned for him, so I wonder what he put next to my name, and I don't want to know because I know you were there too. I know you were there too. So we won't talk about that. Can I just go into how he actually works, or how he worked then. So he creates, and we're talking about working on his plays.
He rewrites nothing. He rewrites nothing. And he has written it very quickly. He's thought about it for 11 and a half months. He writes a play a year, or he did then, and he hates the writing process. So he turns day for night, writes during the night, sleeps during the day. Heather stays awake 24 hours a day, feeding him during the night, fending off people trying to get at him during the day, you know. And at the end of the days, of those sort of, what, maybe as little as 4 or 5 days, he's finished the play. And he quite often, sometimes he'd deliver them in the bar if it's finished, or if but as often as not, he'd drive round. He said, "Well, you'll get it by midnight," and maybe sort of midnight or 1 o'clock, or maybe even 2 o'clock, you'd hear the purr of the BMW draw up outside your house, and you'd be waiting inside the letterbox, waiting for this script to come through, and you'd rush off and read it, and there'd be a lovely little thing, "I'd like you to play so and so," and just maybe 1 or 2 little thoughts about it, and then the next morning you're in rehearsal. You read it 10 o'clock the next morning, and at 2 o'clock you'll have it, putting it on his feet and rehearsing it. Now,
wow,
Alan always says that until he hears it coming out of the mouths of the actors who he has cast, that he doesn't really know what he's written, but it's very interesting. He doesn't change anything, you know. It's actually seeing. It's as if there's almost automatic writing going on somewhere. I mean, he. I don't know whether he does it now. I think he now goes straight onto a computer, onto a keyboard. But he always used to write in longhand, in pencil. And then he would read those out in character to Heather, who would type it out. And but the rehearsals were just amazing, because clearly he had, you know, he knew the play obviously better than anyone. And that's something I've learned from him. As a director, make sure before you start directing, you know the play better than anyone. It's funny, by the end of the rehearsal period, I usually find I could almost prompt anyone. And it has been known that I've had to go on for people, you know, if they've lost their voice or something, and so that knowledge is terribly important. But he doesn't seem to do anything. He's there. His hands are there, not touching, but they're just there in case you need help. And occasionally, the thing to remember with Alan is always listen to everything he says. And it may be the last thing that he says as he walks out of the green room at the coffee break. Oh, you might try it with a bit of
And that's the thing.
That's the thing.
Yeah. I always say to people that when you get an Alan Ayckbourn script, and your character's about to come on, some playwrights give a real description, a real in-depth description.
Yeah.
But often he'll just say something like for instance, 10 Times Table. You know, you created Donald.
Yeah.
And I know it says, enter Donald, a grey man in his 50s. But that sentence says so much, a grey man in his 50s. That's it. That's all you get.
That's
it. From there.
Absolutely. And you know, I think part of it, and even the stage directions are quite sparse. And part of it, I think, is to sort of maintain copyright, so that only he can do the best production, really, or someone who's been privy to it. You know, you get, which is why I felt myself so utterly privileged, because I was there in the rehearsal room with him as all a string after string of these wonderful plays came tumbling out, and I happened to be in the right place at the right time. My goodness, what a bit of luck.
But then how did you feel, Robin, when your play is a success up in Scarborough and it's taken to London and they have to cast names and all the work that you've done from day one really goes for nothing? They are in London, they're doing their thing. Was there any parts of you that thought, I want to go to London as well, I want to play that part?
Yes, yes, but there was also the fact that you were working on his next one by then. You'd actually, you know, he'd written another wonderful monster for you to play. You know? So actually, and Alan has a very low boredom threshold. So once that's on, we're on to the next. And so, you know, it was full on, and he hasn't stopped. He's 81, and he hasn't stopped. And in fact, he's actually recorded his own play as an actor with Heather, called Anno Domino, and it's on the website of the Stephen Joseph Theatre if you want to go. And it's there for about another 3 weeks. And I have it on my list to tune in. But I mean, he's extraordinary.
Did he ever lose his temper in rehearsals? Because actors can be sometimes, you know, once actors start to laugh, as disciplined as they are, once one actor goes, another actor goes, and you might as well all go home. What was he like in that situation?
He never minded laughter. Because in a way, it was a compliment. He's very even-tempered in the rehearsal room. Sometimes he's quite, you know, he can be quite demanding. And when time is short, and quite often it was, that was tricky. But he very rarely lost his temper. It did happen, but very rarely, very, very rarely.
And you were a young company of actors, you know. If there was a part in the show of an older lady, sometimes an actress of 35 would be playing that character.
That's right. So in 10 Times Table, I played the part you played, and Alison Skilbeck, who was only about 18 months older than I was in real life, had to play my 80-year-old mother. But it was sort of accepted. It was in the round, Mark. I can't tell you the joy of working in the round. It's terrifying to start with if you'd have been thrown to the lions, because you can't turn up stage and you know, everywhere you look there's someone looking at you. So you have to focus on your fellow actors. And you keep your focus with them, and that's just brilliant. But it meant you could have very detailed work, and the audience was sort of hovering above you, eavesdropping. And that was wonderful. And somehow, because we were all, it was a semi-rolling permanent company. You know, we people would join at the beginning of a season, and there'd usually be 4 or 5 people from the last season, and then equally when at the end we might drop a couple and pick up a couple of new ones. But I mean, Chris Godwin went on for about 7 years. I was there for 13 years. I mean, not just as an actor, because I then, you know, became director, but you know, a 5-month contract that stretches into 13 years. Whoa.
So that was Robin Herford talking about working at the Stephen Joseph Theatre in the Round with Alan Ayckbourn. Robin became associate director there, and he had to find a Christmas play. And that's how he stumbled across what has now become the most chilling and thrilling play in the West End, The Woman in Black. That's the next episode. Thank you so much for watching that conversation. If you've enjoyed it, please go to the Acting for Others website, which is actingforothers.co.uk, and hit the donate button, which will take you immediately to the Just Giving page. And please give as little or as much as you possibly can to help those performers and people in the industry who really need your help financially right now. Thanks a lot.